Hey, howdy and hello and welcome to The Crazy Train, the comedy podcast with no rails from Emotionally 14. I'm your host, as always, Rob Wade, and I'm joined once again, as always, via satellite by my rock, the incomparable and inimitable Blake Harmer.
I'll learn to move one day.
You will learn to move one day, but, thankfully it doesn't make for fantastic radio when you move around a lot, so either way, I wouldn't worry about it too much.
It would just be a long rustling effect. It would sound terrible.
This is true, yeah. It would be just basically the little microphone at the bottom of your headset would just be kind of rustling up against your hoodie and... Who needs to deal with that? And I have only so much editing skill to remove things, so I can't promise that it would turn out okay. And joining us, we have a guest from the Britpod scene, and more specifically, the Ragbag podcast, Frank. Good evening, Frank.
Hello.
Glad to have you aboard the Crazy Train.
Yeah, it's good to be aboard the Crazy Train. Yeah.
You are only our third kind of guest from outside outside our little bubble, our little echo chamber. You are only the third to grace our hall, so
representative from the real world.
Yeah, I'm most certainly not a denizen of that particular realm. So my life is spent in front of screens like these.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I am, to be honest.
Well, we'll find out, won't we? Over the next hour or so, then people can get a sense and they can make their own minds, make their own minds up even. That's a word. That's an actual phrase. I've forgotten how to speak, and this is probably the worst possible time to do so. So, Frank, you are the host with the most of the Ragbag podcast. Now, you're listed as a music and comedy podcast, and we like to think we do at least one of those things. So, you're in good company, hopefully. Now, for those who've never heard the show, kind of give us the elevator pitch, like just the broad kind of strokes, what it's all about.
So I play a character who is loosely based on myself, but is slightly psychotic, and he hosts the podcast. Hi, I'm Frank Burton. Basically, I play music from all different genres from all over the world, and so it's kind of partly a serious music show and partly kind of a crazy sort of narrative comedy show at the same time. So it's kind of operating on two different levels at the same time, if that makes sense.
So that's pretty cool.
The music doesn't have any sort of comedic element, and the comedy doesn't have any musical element.
Yeah.
So there's two different things going on, kind of similar to what Chris Morris was doing in the 90s with Blue Jam. Did you ever hear that?
I didn't know. My Chris Morris knowledge limits to the Day-to-Day, Brass Eye, and that first series of the IT Crowd.
Oh, no, you should check Blue Jam out. It's really insane.
Yeah, I'm going to make a note because he's right up my street in any other respect, so I feel like he would probably work there too.
Yeah, well, there was a TV sketch show called Jam, which was based on the radio show Blue Jam.
I have heard of that. I was a big fan.
Yeah, and that went to some quite dark sort of places. My show's a lot lighter than that, and it's kind of clean and family friendly to an extent.
To an extent is always a good caveat.
Well, yeah. I just like to, I can throw in mildly subversive jokes and get away with it, I think, because people aren't necessarily expecting me to do that. And And the other little touchstone that I would mention is that I'm quite heavily influenced by Welcome to Night Vale, the American podcast.
Oh, yes, I know the one, yeah.
Yes. So because that's based on a similar principle in that it's basically just one person talking. It's like a monologue.
Yeah.
And it's one person talking, but there's lots of outside characters who kind of intrude on his world, but you don't really hear them. You just hear from them through this one voice. So that's kind of what I'm doing with Ragbag as well.
Nice. So, okay. So what I mean, obviously, I'm always curious about what gets people going into podcasting and kind of why they choose the format they choose. So the first question obviously is kind of what I can understand. I think I understand, but just kind of give us the sense of what made podcasting the kind of medium you wanted to go for.
Oh, well, I've been a kind of a fan of podcasts since podcasts started, however long ago that was. I think it's sort of, 10, 15 years ago, I think, something like that. And I had it in the back of my mind as something that I wanted to do for quite a long time. And I wanted to do originally the original idea was I was going to do like a serious like music show.
Okay.
But because I do a lot of sort of comedy writing and stuff as well, it ended up being a lot more kind of comedic with me as the presenter, and I introduced like a storytelling element. So I basically, there's kind of like a short story that I tell every week as well. So I'm going to turn that into something or other. I've actually, because my first sort of creative outlet was I was a writer, and I still am a writer, and I've got a book coming out quite soon, which
cool.
I would like to plug as well.
Of course, it will be ample opportunity at the very end of the show. You will be able to plug for as long as your heart desires. It sounds like it'll be quite a long section. Me and Blake might want to step out.
No, it's literally just that. I got a book coming out. That's it. And yes, and I'm probably going to do something with turning the ragbag narrative into some kind of novel as well at some point.
Okay, nice.
As Welcome to Night Vale have done, they've released a couple of novels off the back of their show as well.
It seems to be quite a popular thing. I've noticed because I've started listening to a show called The Adventure Zone. I'm not sure if you've heard of it.
I've heard of it, but I've not heard it.
So it's basically, do you know the McElroys? They're sort of American former game journalists who sort of got into podcasting, I think some years ago. But they do two shows that I'm familiar with vaguely. One's called My Brother and Me, which is them giving kind of terrible agony aunt style advice, but with a really surreal twist. So there's one that they turned into a TV show, which was what was the original question was something about I'm worried that my uni room is haunted. So they went to they sort of kitted out a similar thing with they went to a local kind of paraphernalia store and just bought the spookiest looking stuff they could find and just kitted out this student room with all the weirdest crap they could find in this shop, and this scary looking clown dolls and things like that, and just made it look as evil as possible, and then sort of tested how long they could stand to be in that room. Just kind of weird takes like that. And then the other one is Adventure Zone, which is them and their dads playing D&D. So then one is the sort of the dungeon master, and then the other three play just like characters inside the world, and they've turned that into a comic book. So it sounds like it might be a new thing to take something with a narrative and adapt it to another form of media. I think the possibilities there, and I can see I wouldn't be surprised if a lot more people were doing it, because there's quite a few shows that I've heard that I think they should bring this out as a book or something like that. I mean, why not? Yeah, absolutely. If, like you say, some of these have probably got some writing involved in the sort of production and the preparation. So even something like Serial, you could probably turn into a book very easily, because she's probably had to draft out a large volume of written content to read from and to riff off in the first instance. So it makes a lot of sense. So what was the kind of the thinking behind framing it with a character? Was that just a kind of comedic background that sort of drove that, or was there something else behind it?
Well, the character kind of developed because I started. The reason why the character's called Frank Burton in the first place is that it was originally just me, and I just me kind of trying to be funny, and me trying to be funny was okay. It was working okay, but then I thought, well, why don't I just push this a little bit further and just see how crazy I can become? And I basically became this character who's kind of difficult to do. I should check those podcasts out that you mentioned, actually, because the bad agony uncle routine is something that I do quite often, quite often as well. Just give people crazy advice. And,
It's fun. It's none of those things should ever be mistaken for legitimate advice. But way back when on Emotionally 14, when we used to do kind of exclusively written content, I used to have a similar thing where I would take a fictional character called Dr. Bartender and just make him a kind of agony uncle. And then I'd always kind of go with the premise of, this is a guy who basically has no understanding of how anything works, and yet somehow has become positioned to give out advice to the people around. And I would kind of go out on my way to find real letters from things like the agony aunt columns in things like the Mirror and stuff. And I would actually go looking for those things, strip the answer out, just find, rephrase the question, and then just run with it and see how much fun I could have. It's quite, I imagine it's quite entertaining to do as a show. So it's am I right in thinking it's a relatively, this particular show hasn't been kind of going for an amazingly long time? Is that
no, just a few months now. Yeah, started in February. So yeah.
So you're building up on your first year. But it sounds like you've been in the game, as it were, for quite a while before that. Yeah.
Well, I worked at the BBC in like a non-broadcasting role.
Oh wow!
I was kind of a disability guy, so I worked with quite a few broadcasts, and I got to see kind of quite a few programs being made, and things like that, and how the professionals go about doing these things. So it was kind of interesting. In particular, there's because I was working with disabled people quite a lot. There's the BBC's disability kind of strand, or whatever they call it. They do this podcast called Ouch, BBC Ouch, I was kind of a support worker on that. So I basically just kind of saw how that was put together from start to finish in terms of getting the guests in and kind of doing the interviews and editing and everything like that. So that was a good little tutorial for the future in how to actually do my own thing. Yeah,
for sure. I mean, that's, it's always nice to have somebody kind of who knows roughly. I mean, basically they have to just be one lesson ahead, I guess. But, if somebody knows what they're doing and they've kind of got the basics down, you can kind of get that from them. It saves you, having to puzzle that stuff out, and you can get very easily lost on the internet generally, but especially when you're kind of looking for something particularly, you can spend a lot of time just digging into things, and then you look for something and it's not quite what you want, but then you get sucked into that and you go looking for it for ages and turns out it's not what you want at all. All these sort of things can end up just sapping evenings out of your life. And I speak from bitter experience, as you might have guessed. It's many an evening to going down the wrong track trying to solve a problem. But thankfully, not as many as it could have been, I guess. So so this is your first personal foray into podcasting then?
It is, yes. Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm finding my feet with it slowly. I'm kind of working out kind of what works and what doesn't work. And I've kind of, got to a point where I'm a bit more kind of, I can be a little bit more adventurous with what I do in terms of editing around stuff. And I've started kind of interviewing bands as well, which is like an extra little sort of bonus element that I've started doing. So that's going well at the moment as well.
Yes, it seems to be good. I mean, I saw your most recent, I think it's the most recent episode where you've got quite a famous singer. You've got a celebrity in a singing context, but not the usual kind of celebrity you might expect. Right? Is that the most recent episode?
Yes.
The one I'm talking about?
Yeah, it is the most recent one. Yes, that was quite a catch, to be honest with you. It's kind of a semi-exclusive thing for me because I kind of hooked up with this guy called Ethan Uslan, who's got this very, very niche podcast called The Carolina Shout, because he's like a ragtime pianist. Oh. So if you're into ragtime piano, then you'll know all about
our listeners. My understanding is our listeners are massive on it. Like, it's just one of those things. It's bad movies, professional wrestling, video games, and ragtime.
Yeah, well, it's a good little mix there, isn't it? Yeah, but the thing is, he happens to be friends with Jesse Eisenberg. So, so Jesse Eisenberg appeared on his podcast, and he revealed that this song that he'd written 12 years ago as part of this like stage musical.
Okay.
But the stage musical never got made. So so that song's never been heard outside of the Carolina Shout and now Ragbag, because I played it on my show, and I got I didn't get directly in touch with Jesse. I got in touch with him through Ethan. So I'm kind of one step removed from Jesse Eisenberg. And so he said yes, that I was allowed to play his song, and it's a very good song as well.
Excellent. There you go. Well, I'll make sure that there's a link in the show notes to that specific episode, because I think that will be one that people will find interesting. Because, as I say, we've got a lot of movie fans on the Crazy Train in our small but vocal community. They're big on movies especially. So, I think that would
Yeah, well, this is the thing that a lot of people might not know, because if you look at Jesse Eisenberg's Wikipedia page, for example, it doesn't mention anything about his musical background at all.
Okay.
It starts off with his TV career, then goes on to his film career.
Yeah.
But he started out in musical theatre. And I've found this out just from kind of the contacts that I've got within the podcasting world.
Cool.
Maybe this will take off somehow for me.
If we can play our small part when we get to say I knew him, then, we'll be more than happy to do so.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, excellent stuff. I mean, let's say, we're very glad to have you, and we can now do, we will just kind of do the Crazy Train thing. So for those who aren't familiar with what that is, we are the podcast with no rails. We start from a conversation and we go wherever the world takes us, and nobody knows where the Crazy Train goes. Now, if that sounds like your bag, then welcome aboard, and we're glad to have you. And if that doesn't, then stick a spoon up your ass and get to fuck Island. But, thank you very much for trying, as always. I've fulfilled my legal obligation, and now we can kind of move on from there. I don't have to keep reminding people that, the spoon is up their ass for a reason.
Has anyone ever got in touch with you and said, I actually did stick a spoon up my arse and get to Fuck Island?
That we have.
And I'm having a whale of a time.
That may be it. I mean, maybe we're giving the wrong advice out in terms of if we're looking for people to have an experience they find less than amusing or less than pleasant, maybe we're going about it the wrong way. I mean, ultimately, Rule 34, if it exists, there is porn about it. So it's reasonable to surmise that somewhere out there in a dark corner of Reddit, most likely Reddit, it's going to be Reddit, is a subreddit devoted to spoon up ass porn from Fuck Island.
Yeah, I don't think we really thought about the implications of medical lawsuits as well.
Well, we do have to throw in the odd legal disclaimer every now and then, but thankfully, we never had to do that particular one. No, this is true. But I suppose it's, at any given time, we could theoretically open ourselves up. But I'd like to think that nobody in their right mind would take what we say as serious advice, because they should know better. We've made it abundantly clear that we are not to be trusted for anything serious. So,
well, your suggestion also contains the word "if." You're saying if.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a hypothetical scenario.
Exactly, and they have a choice. Yeah. They can, all they have to do to avoid that is enjoy the show. I don't think that's much to ask. I'm very happy with it. So,
now I feel forced.
Yeah, well, they've said if, so now I feel even more compelled.
Yeah.
But Blake, you are the weird edge case that we keep talking about.
I know. I feel obligated to like this program, to like this show, in the event that I have to stick a spoon up my ass in the alternative.
I'd like to think, Blake, that you would like the show for reasons other than because the alternative is I might stick a spoon up your ass. If nothing else, because we've done it for 6 years nearly.
Yeah.
I feel like at that point, it's either that or Stockholm syndrome, isn't it? Let's be fair.
I am comfortable.
This is true.
I'm just wondering what sort of spoon I would use. Maybe I'd start off with like a teaspoon or something, and then work my way up to.
I feel like you'd have to, wouldn't you? You wouldn't want to start with. What you'd want to start with actually is like those ones that come in Calpol, like the little plastic ones that you can either get in 2.5 or 5 mil. There's the ones that are like double-ended.
Yeah, that was fine. Now I might swap it round.
Exactly, yeah. If
they kind of closely resemble some kind of sex aid anyway, I think.
They do. The only thing you'd have to be careful of, I guess, is they're not very big. So you could very easily lose it if you're not careful, I would guess. If anybody's had that happen to them, write in. Please, no pictures. I'll say that. Please write in, but no visual aids or any other kind.
Oh, time to take my medicine. Oh, where did I leave that spoon?
Yeah. Oh, man, I'm having to swig Calpol from the bottle. This sucks.
Yeah. I don't know why it is, and maybe it's for this reason, but because I've got 2 kids, and I never throw Calpol sticks away.
Oh,
so
okay.
I've gone through many bottles of Calpol.
Yeah.
I've got an entire drawer just full of Calpol sticks. What the fuck am I supposed to do with these things now?
Well, clearly, maybe we can start a kind of relief fund for those who every day people wish to stick spoons up their ass but don't have the means. Just £1 a day. I can't imagine they cost £1 because I mean, Calpol's what? Well, I mean, Calpol's pretty expensive, I guess.
It's expensive stuff. Yeah.
Well, they can afford quality spoons then, I would guess.
If we need to think of giveaways for when we do conventions or something, we could. I suppose we could use that.
We get branded spoons.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we could have grades of them, like T-shirt sizes, just the little Calpol ones, all the way up to like a ladle, just something you'd spoon like soup out with. And that could be, I don't know, is there a bigger one? I can't think of a bigger spoon.
Larger spoon than a ladle.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like that's
just a tennis racket at that point.
I think you're going into garden implements now, sort of spades.
Yeah. I think at that point, if we're having to throw in the extra, if we go, the longer we go, maybe we'll kind of increase the size of the implement that goes in somebody's arse in the event they don't enjoy the show. Maybe that's the solution. So just by episode 300, we'll just be like, stick a forklift truck up your ass. It's just got to that point by the end.
Yeah, dear E14, I disliked the Crazy Train so much, I've now lost the trowel.
Episode 100, we read our first spoon-related mishap.
Yeah.
Oh dear me. How's everybody doing? So it's obviously it's late October. It's starting to get cold and dark and depressing. And I mean, I realize I haven't set that up very well.
No, I like it. I prefer the winter.
I'm an autumn guy, so I'm kind of with you there. Like, it's nice to have the sort of, it's a bit chillier. I fucking hate the hot weather. I really I can't swing with it at all. I'm not built for hot weather. I just can't. I try my best and I just can't. Every year I get sick of the fucking stuff and I'm just miserable by the end of summer. I'm just like, let it end. And then it does. And then I'm like, oh, it wasn't so bad, was it? Because then it starts getting cold. And kind of, I guess, like December's when it starts to really kind of ramp up, right? When it gets kind of really cold. Obviously, we're all in the UK, so it's like
but I like it when it gets really cold. I like wrapping up warm. And I really like the snow as well. I'm like a little child.
I used to be like that until I started commuting. And now I find myself going like, fuck this snow. Just, it's so hard. And I don't want to be that way. But it's just, I suppose I have softened a bit since I've gained the ability to work from home. Now that I've got that, it's not so bad. And the snow is kind of, as long as I'm prepared to take, to get in place, like bring my laptop home so I can actually do that if needs be, I don't mind it so much. And if it snows, and I'm just kind of, that's fine, And there is something to be said for like seeing kids having fun. I was about to say watching kids, but that's the wrong
wrong podcast.
Yeah, very much so. We're never releasing that podcast because any attempts to actually. So Frank, I don't know if you're familiar with this one. There's a running joke that there's a big. I've got this catalogue of ideas, and one of them is it's one that we just call the Paedophile Cast. And it is, it's the one show that I've always sworn will never happen, mainly because if we ever did it legitimately, it would be really boring because it'd be one episode, it'd be about 4 minutes long, and it would be whoever's on the show just going, we can all agree they're wrong, right? Yeah. Theme music.
Oh, yeah, thank you. There's a theme tune?
Yeah. Intro and outro, man. You got to pad that time out. This podcast is brought to you by
the Jim will fix it theme, surely.
Yeah, well, yeah. Top of the pops, perhaps. We're talking about this earlier today, right?
Timey kangaroo down sport. There's many to choose from.
This is true, and I realised this the other day because I was watching an episode of Frasier on TV. It was a repeat. Well, obviously, because it's long since over. But there's an episode where Elvis Costello guests as a sort of session musician who just plays in their cafe, and it forces them to leave because they're sort of stuffed shirts, and he's playing folk music and that. And he starts playing Timey Kangaroo Down Sport. And Jen just went, couldn't make that today. Just, she's not wrong. It's nowadays you would have to be a bit more careful about stuff like that. Even though there's nothing wrong with the physical song itself. It's not like there's any kind of hidden. Well, as far as I know, there's no hidden messaging to it. I suppose if it's hidden, you wouldn't know, would you?
No, but the song itself had they had to take out the racist verse from it.
Oh, I do remember hearing something. I don't think I've ever heard the verse though.
I mean, the original song, because it was all tie me kangaroo down and do this with my that.
Yeah.
And the verse was called.
He did feel like he's running out of steam by that verse. Watch me do this with that.
It was
mate.
Strap down my slave Jim.
It was let my abos go loose.
Oh, bloody.
Oh, okay.
Because it was somebody's name at the end, wasn't it? So it's let my abos go loose, Lou.
Right. Okay. Wow. Yeah, that's you feel like at that point they'd probably just, abs. They just kind of extend it and just kind of try and remove the O sound or just bleep it, I guess.
Let my bleep go loose, Lou.
Yeah. Make it sound fantastic.
I was going to say.
Yeah.
That's just adding to the evidence of it.
Yeah. Oh, Rolf's just whipping his cock out of the song. Never mind that.
We're all surprised when we found out he was a nonce.
I was actually quite disappointed, and it was weird because it had been timed after an episode we'd recorded where somebody had made that joke along those lines, and I went, no, I've got to cut that out because it's going to be libelous. And then about a week later, he got charged with, it's like, well, I've learned something today, haven't I? It's probably still a good call. Just being on the safe side, because ultimately somebody can be charged with something and then later on they can be found to be innocent or whatever. I don't think that happened with him. I think it's pretty clear, cut and dry that he's a wrong un. Which is a shame, really. So he was such a fixture in my childhood, but obviously by the sounds of it, I wasn't his type.
This is turning into the paedophile cast by the sound of things.
Only in passing mentions. We were allowed to reference it kind of ironically, but the limit that's about the limit. We can't go into. If we start doing intros and outros, then something's gone horribly wrong. But I don't know. Did you find like when that kind of came out? They do this in the news a lot. I think I talked about it at the time. Like any celebrity that goes through that, whether it turns out to be true or not, because obviously there's been like cases like Cliff Richard and stuff where it's been not found to be the case, and obviously he went through that whole court thing, and whatever. But there's this thing in the period where the newspapers have got what seems to be two filing cabinets. One with pictures of them looking like a pedo and one of them looking completely normal. And they just kind of interchange between the two depending on what the court verdict is. Because I've never seen Rolf Harris look more sinister than the photo that was released in the paper the day after. Never in my life. And I could, I include that lost episode of Rolf's Cartoon Club where he just drew a dying baby and went, legal disclaimers that may or may not have happened. See what I mean? Every now and then we have to drop one in. It's just one of those things.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't be surprised if they do that. Actually, just have like a picture of the dodgy looking celebrity. Yeah. I'll keep that for in case he does something dodgy.
Yeah, exactly.
Makes sense because otherwise they've got to scramble around trying to find one.
Yeah, this is true. Like you could just imagine that morning at the Guardian. It's just like, Harris, have you got that picture of fucking Michael Barrymore looking sus as fuck?
Yeah, it's like if they didn't write obituaries in advance, they'd have to do it on the day. Yeah, this is true. Yeah, I mean, they must have a template. Like I worry sometimes that you're going to see some sort of, not like an A-list celebrity, but somebody relatively famous, like a sort of. I'm trying to think who's a mid-level. It's not like a David Tennant. He's not like a AAA big Hollywood blockbuster star, but he is he's a well-known face and name. One day, somebody kind of just below his level of fame is going to die, and there's going to be placeholder text in the obituary, like just paste in details later, things like the sad death of person here. When you get that kind of, in the same way as you get like when you get very obviously badly personalized emails, like, dear customer, you are one of our most valued customers. Like, am I? Because I feel like if I was, you'd have remembered my name. Doesn't seem like much to ask, but what do I know? I'm only on the receiving end. I think as long as somebody's got a Wikipedia page I think that makes obituarist's life a little bit easier.
That's true.
Just copy and paste from Wikipedia. Before Wikipedia, they'd have been screwed.
That's true. Yeah, I suppose I hadn't really given it much thought about whether the digital age had much of an effect on that stuff, but that makes a lot of sense. But then in the same way, you're probably going to open yourself up to the same problem. It's like you see like a broken hyperlink inside their obituary in the paper. It's just like, or you get the alt text that just what you're supposed to get when you mouse over something. Yeah. It's like, buy merchandise from the store. Or there's a little 3 where the source goes. Little tiny 3 in their obituary. True story. Except for the bits I made up. Blake, how have you been? You're very quiet.
Yeah, I'm fine. Yeah, you'd lost me a little bit there. I was just smiling and nodding.
Yeah, I've had that effect. At least at the plus, it's not just the two of us. It's 10 times worse when that happens and it's just me and you.
Yeah. Yep, that's certainly a thing you said.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, Rob, that's, yeah. Sorry, Frank, what were you going to say?
Oh, I don't know now.
Oh, fair enough. That's all right. So is there a big kind of podcasting community where you're based kind of geographically? Do you have a lot of podcasting friends who are kind of nearby or?
Not really, but I've just discovered that there is because, I'm not in Manchester. I'm very close to Manchester.
Okay.
And I've somebody invited me to this podcasters meetup in Manchester. That I haven't actually, gone to any of these light events before. So this will be my first one. So I've got one coming up. But also there's another one that's got. I found this other group that's got about like 150 members or something. Oh, wow. So I'll have to listen to all of their shows and stuff, won't I?
I don't think you'd be expected to listen to every single one. That would be. I do struggle sometimes. I don't know if you're the same way because I spend a lot of time listening to podcasts just because obviously, not just because it's what I do, but I used to quite enjoy them before I started doing it as well. But just the sheer volume that gets produced, I can't always keep up. It's just, and it seems like it never ends. You just find yourself thinking like, when do you sleep? Like there's some outlets like our friend's Carl at the Tumbling Sabre is a Canadian. It feels like he must kind of just stay through the night and eventually he's just going to get to like 50 years old and just fall asleep for a year and a half just to catch up because he just seems to never stop releasing stuff. Like how do you kind of, in terms of like, because you're a weekly show, right?
No, fortnightly. I've done that I've kind of gone weekly lately because of the bonus episode. So I'm doing I'm alternating between the main one and the bonus ones. But the original idea was to do it fortnightly just so it's manageable, it's nobody expects me to do a weekly show. So
no, this is true. I mean, I can totally
I've got no boss here who's breathing down my neck saying you must do a weekly show.
No, that's true. That's true. Yeah, but I was curious as like how do you kind of keep yourself balanced between putting stuff out and also giving yourself time to relax, both for the sense of kind of getting to know you better and also because I'm after ideas of how to do that myself because I'm not very good at it. I tend to always be doing stuff.
Oh, well, it's a bit of both really because I kind of find it relaxing quite a bit because quite a lot of the preliminary stuff of putting one of the Ragbag episodes together is listening to a bunch of music and deciding what I'm going to put on the playlist. Okay.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And that's just something that I would be doing anyway. But part of that is just like walking around listening to stuff and go, yeah, I'll go for that. I'll go for that.
Yeah.
I mean, unfortunately, there's a lot of kind of admin involved in this sort of thing. I've got to get permission to use the tune. So
I was about to ask, actually. Yeah.
So it's like, but the thing is, I've been doing this since February. So let's say, the show's like 45 minutes long and it's been coming out every fortnight since February. So however many hours of music that is, I've only ever had one person say no.
That's pretty good going. I was going to ask actually how you go about, obviously there would be a problem if you were just kind of Yeah, the top 40 will do. That'll work fine. But I'm just kind of curious as to how you choose. And then, I say, is there a kind of, what's the process for sort of reaching out to, do you kind of just reach out to them on social media, or is there sort of more to it than that?
I'd go through basically just, I'd kind of select what I want to play. Mm-hmm. I get in touch with, usually they've got a Bandcamp page or something like that, and I'll contact them through Bandcamp or something like that, and just say, I want to play this tune in my podcast. This is my podcast, and can I do it? And they write back and say yes, and it's as simple as that, really.
Okay, fair enough.
But the person who said no didn't say no because they didn't like the idea of it. They said no because their record company charges loads of money if somebody wants to pay. So it's just to do with their kind of contractual obligations, I'm sure they would have been fine with me playing their song. But independent artists and stuff like that don't have those kind of contracts in place, and they just want to get their music out there any which way they can. So
no, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, it makes total sense. But
I mean, the actual admin, the admin side of it, of actually sort of all this correspondence and stuff like that's the only boring parts, I would say.
Writing out emails and stuff.
Sitting down and writing emails to people. I mean, it's a copy and paste job, you know what I mean? Sorry, guys, if you're listening, I didn't compose that from scratch. That was a copy and paste job.
I feel that people who genuinely expect personalized everything all the time are, let's put it kindly, unrealistic in their expectations. I've had that before. I remember there was a discussion. This was actually in a very early Britpod scene discussion, and there's no right or wrong answer to this. I'm not sort of saying this to have a go, but there was a question about, like, do you find, because you remember when Twitter used to allow you to automatically DM somebody they used to be able to, when people followed you used to be able to send them back a tweet as soon as they followed you saying, thanks for following, here's my stuff, here's my podcast, like, I'm an author, or I'm a video, or I'm an actor, or this is my new short film, whatever you had to kind of plug. You're a
video.
Yeah, I'm a video. I'm hoping we can format.
Please watch me. I don't exist otherwise.
That's a good point. If a video if video's on YouTube and nobody's watching it, does it still make a noise? I mean, I can recommend a channel that definitely can tell you more about that, sadly. But yeah, there used to be that thing, and then there was a discussion going on, like, do you find them annoying or do you find them useful? And, there were people, understandably, who found them annoying. Now, I've only ever had I had 2 negative replies, but I think one was in jest. I think it was just kind of a tongue-in-cheek thing. One person, I sent them a message. It was just, it was an automatic thing, because ultimately I have a lot to do on a daily basis. This is not my full-time job. And so I take any step I can to kind of take some of the legwork out of these processes. And it was very friendly. It wasn't, pushy or anything like that. It was purely, hi, I'm Rob. I'm a podcaster. Here's, I do this podcast. Here is a list to all the podcasts. Give them a listen if you fancy it. Let me know what you think if you do. You'd think relatively kind of, I would say, certainly not aggressive in any sense. I feel like it's pretty cut and dry. Very, very respectful. I say very non-committal, very non-pushy. I got a reply back that said, "Kill yourself." Like, Jesus Christ!
Bit harsh.
I thought it was a little much. Yeah. One, like I say, this is the one that I thought was tongue in cheek. I sent them the exact same message, and they just replied, "Fuck off, Rob." I found that. I found both.
Did you get a little smiley with it or anything? Or
no, not even punctuation. Smiley. No, punctuation. I just like they both amused me for different reasons. To be honest, the tongue-in-cheek one amused me because I think it was deliberately, over the top, and then the other one just amused me because of the sheer how over the top reaction it was for such a trivial thing as just, here's a link to some podcasts. Die. It's like, wow. Some people, I do read a lot of things about like toxicity on the internet, and sometimes I think like maybe they're going over the top, and then I get a message like that, and I'm like, maybe they just get a lot of those, and maybe they're just unfortunate in that respect. Maybe I'm just lucky that I've only ever had 2. Anyway, they've stopped you from being able to send automatic DMs now, so it's a moot point anyway, because now you have to in my case, rather than oh well, I guess sometimes you think like they build these tools out and they say, right, we're taking it away, I guess you're going to have to do it manually. It's like, or I could not do it at all. Let's see how that goes.
Yeah, not do it at all.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'll go with that one, please, because it sounds like way less work. And sure enough, it is. I can vouch for this. It's been the case for about 6 months. I haven't had to do a fucking thing. It's brilliant.
Was it actually, was this thing successful that because I've never actually done this, so I'm just wondering if it actually, did you get some positive response, besides kill yourself, did you get any positive response? I like the fact that you've almost indirectly lumped kill yourself, Rob, in with the positive responses. Aside from that one, did you get any other positive stuff, any other good stuff? Generally, you got the sense that they probably did look at it and then they didn't act on it at all. So that they didn't find it bothersome that you did it. They were quite happy to converse with you, but then they would have nothing further happened after that. Like you'd recommend the show and they'd be like, oh, cool, I love Star Wars. And then it's like, that they just went, in the bin you go. And this is the thing, because you don't necessarily know, because it's like you send somebody a link, you don't know whether they've clicked on it or not. So it's
exactly, they've seen it, but that's it.
Yeah.
I actually think, I don't know how you guys feel about this. I feel like the ability to see when people have seen something you've sent is one of the worst things they've ever done in social media. Because it makes you so paranoid unnecessarily. Because you send a Facebook message or whatever, and you get that little blue, the tick goes from grey to blue, and you're like, right, they've seen it now. And then an hour goes by and nothing happens. And the reason is almost certainly benign. They're busy. They'll come back to me when they're free. But in your mind, you're like, what have I done? What did I say? Have I upset them? It's like, well, fuck them. And by the time they come back to you, like, oh, sorry, I was busy. It's like, fuck off. Kill yourself. Maybe that's how it starts.
Did you ever send like one of these direct message things? Can you see if they just like they follow you, you send them that message, and then did they just like unfollow you again?
That's quite a common practice anyway. I don't think it's related necessarily to the messages. It's not uncommon. Frank, I don't know if you've observed this as well.
Yeah, I have. Like somebody follows you, and then you follow them back, and then they unfollow you. So they've gained a follower,
and then they hope that you haven't noticed that they've fucked off and left you.
Yeah,
because I mean, sometimes obviously they might have your tweets on for a couple of days and decide, oh, this isn't my sort of thing at all. Fair enough, it happens, Like not everybody is obliged to like everyone, but you can see it when it's really shameless, when it's the same amount of time passes and the same 10 accounts drop off, and then they're back again 2 weeks later, and then they drop off again a week after that. And it's like, come on, you think I'm fucking stupid? I get a decent amount of Twitter following, but I don't get so many that I've lost track of some of these names. I recognize them coming back. I'm not bombarded with that much popularity, frankly, that I can't remember a couple of names and recognize a few familiar faces every now and then, I'm curious now as to what you guys kind of do feel is like the worst thing about social media.
The worst thing about social media? Oh my God, there's so many.
Well, you can run off a few.
I just don't like it at all, really.
Okay.
I just don't get on with it because I've only been on social media for about the last sort of 18 months.
Okay.
And before that, I was on MySpace years and years ago.
Classic.
And obviously, I'm not anymore.
No. No bastard.
I am. I checked the other day. I'm still there.
Oh, okay. Your account's still active, but you're not.
Yeah, my account's still active on there. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah. I can't really explain what it is that I don't like about it. I think it's just the too much information factor of it. You
like
go on to Twitter or Facebook, and it's just sort of, you're bombarded with a bunch of stuff which is most of it's not relevant to anything to do with your life, and you know the stuff that interests me on there, but also it's kind of like everything's kind of out of context.
Yes.
So you're being kind of here's this thing, and here's another thing, and here's another thing, and there might be things that you like, or there might be things that aren't relevant to you at all. And here's an advert as well, and here's another advert.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's good. I don't know. I don't think it's good for people's mental health generally.
I would agree. I mean, last week I was on holiday and we were up in Norfolk, and we were in a bit of Norfolk that just happens to have shit phone signal for my network. Other networks are available, but if I don't mention which one it is, I don't have to do any due diligence, so I'll keep it quiet for now. But there's a particular bit of Norfolk where this particular network has no signal whatsoever except for emergency calls, and it was fucking great. It was fantastic. I spent a week not even, checking my phone wasn't even a thought, because there was no point. It did nothing. It would have nothing on it, and I got to the point where actually I came back a couple of days before. My phone went back on Saturday, and actually I came back on Thursday. I just kept it off because I was having such a nice time not worrying about stuff and not having to stress about, I don't know. Like, Twitter's probably my least favorite, certainly at the moment, in terms of just, like you say, the bombardment of stuff, because there's so many people on there. If you're following a lot of people, you just get endless streams of information. Some of it's not relevant. Some of it's just bollocks. Some of it's not relevant to anything. And it's too much. And it's just, we're not really built for sifting through that level of information, it feels like, on a regular basis. And especially when it's, so much kind of noise to useful info. Blake, I know you're massive on social media. And
I know. I have a massive following.
Yeah.
I think the thing I just don't like, I don't know if it more varies on the types of people. That it might just be some of the people I follow or something like that. But I'm never normally a fan of people that seem to use it just to make it a political platform.
Oh God!
I mean, like they're not political. That they may not be. They're not like MPs or councillors or anything. I understand if that's their job.
Yes, that seems fair enough. Yeah.
Yeah, if I'm entering into that, I get everything I have coming to me at the end of the day.
Yeah, that seems fair.
But when I have people that are like, some people will share some funny articles or something like that. I'll share the odd thing every now and then if I find it amusing or whatever. But yeah, I will see people and literally all they'll post consistently every, at least like 10 times a day will just be sharing BBC articles or whatever, and it will all be, like they'll literally, all I'm hearing is like Brexit, basically, and I'm just like,
yep,
I really don't care, It's like,
yeah, I wonder if that was why I had such a nice time in Norfolk, because the only news I was hearing was what was on TV, and so it's kind of it's obviously it's curated, it's chosen, but it's the most important stuff. It's not here's what the Brexit secretary had for lunch on Thursday, because they got 24 hours of news cycle to fill.
It's like they would just share it repeatedly. I mean, like, okay, whether you're, whatever side of the fence you are, because I see articles from both sides of the fence.
Yeah, sure.
But it just seems to be they're shouting the same thing over and over again, and and it gets to the point where I'm like, who are you actually talking to? Because you're not talking to each other. You're just shouting to people that you agree with, while other people are shouting. And all the people that are commenting are people that agree with them. So I'm a bit like, what are you hoping? What are you achieving here?
Yeah. There's an image that did the rounds a couple of months ago, which felt quite. It sort of struck a chord with me quite a lot. Was this kind of? It was like the political spectrum, and it was just a flat line. and it had two little tiny slivers, far left and far right, and then a big chunk in the middle that was just shut up, shut up, shut up, shut up, shut up. That kind of, I feel like I'm somewhere in that big space. That's sort of my sense. But then I would say that, wouldn't I? You know, even if I was on one end or the other, I'd feel like, I'm the reasonable one.
Yeah. Well, the fascist podcast hasn't started yet. So.
No. Well, you know that will. if I know my ordering, that will come slightly before the not by much. But when we get to the point where that catalogue is that big, I've got bigger problems.
Yeah.
So you're doing the fascist podcast now?
Not right now.
When's
That'll be whenever the hell I please. And you will just have to, and that'll be the first of its kind, a podcast that actually just puts itself on your device without you subscribing. You will enjoy it.
I was going to say that would definitely be a dictatorship of podcasts.
It would, yeah. This is true, yeah. Man, now I'm thinking about the logistics of making that work. Is there a way to just get...
Just ask you too.
Yeah, I suppose you could. Hey, Bono, you're a tool. you know about tool things. I don't know. I'm sure he's lovely. I'm sure he's a perfectly lovely chap. But he always just comes off so fucking... so Bono.
I did a thing on Bono on my Facebook page. It was a joke because I had this joke, right? It's a joke. It's clearly a joke. And
you don't have to caveat.
They're always the best one with the caveats.
It's clearly a joke. But I didn't start it by saying this is clearly a joke.
No.
So I came up with this. I added Bono's face to it later. I just thought it was kind of funny. I thought Bono's face fitted nicely next to it.
Okay.
So the quote was, I'm so firmly committed to equal rights. A lot of people are now saying I'm the king of equality. And that was the quote. And I put Bono's face next to it in like a little meme thing. Mm-hmm. So I'd learn how to do memes.
Yeah.
And so many people just assume that's something that Bono actually said.
You can't be held responsible for that, Frank.
Like,
I'm sorry.
It's the most commented on thing I've ever done in my life. You can see it on the. If you want to go to the Ragbag podcast Facebook page, it's still there. All the comments are still there.
Yeah.
And I'm just egging them on as well. You can see me egging them on. I'm like,
yeah, of course, because that's half the fun sometimes. Is if people are really off on one, you're just like, I know I should calm this down, but at the same time, I'm having too much fun to stop.
Yeah. So,
what were the kind of comments out of interest like?
Everything from what a total wanker to who said it? Who said that Bono is the king of equality? I want to know who it was who said that.
Sources, take your source. No, we're on the internet. That doesn't work. It seems. Well, I'm only guessing by the fact that Twitter is a thing at all, and some of the discussions I've observed. You can only assume that sources are irrelevant, and if you ask for them, you're either what was it? You're either a libtard or you're a Russian bot. With seemingly no middle ground whatsoever. You're either one of those two, depending on which kind of source you ask for and from whom. Guess it's easier to dismiss them if they're robots.
Yeah. Don't get many Russian libtards either.
No, that's true, actually. It's kind of a feature of their whole regime, really. Not so many of those. Certainly not many vocal ones. Read into that what you might. I guess you can infer what you need to from that particular geopolitical situation. We don't pass comment. We let you make your own minds up. Mainly because I wouldn't even know where to begin with that one. It's the geopolitics podcast it's sort of middle of the pack, I would say. Like it's not anywhere near down the bottom where the other stuff lies, but it's not the top priority on my list. I feel like movies or wrestling would be next. I don't know. Yeah. I may be wrong, but I feel like those are a bit, I would say those are a bit less, polarizing, but actually DC and Marvel movies prove that's not the case in the slightest. Because every time I read a fucking movie article now, it's like somebody finds a way to work in the concept of Marvel and DC going to battle. When actually I don't think they dislike each other that strongly. I really don't. I don't think there's any rivalries beyond what people kind of assume must be happening to justify their weird protective turf wars for entirely in their own minds. But then I would say that because I'm one of them, aren't I? Whatever they are, one of those. Yeah. As you can see, Frank, Blake is, very, very spirited on this issue.
Well,
what do you? I haven't got an opinion on this, but I'm tempted to agree with you because they are both, making a shit ton of money.
Yeah,
and they're not. But it's not like a rivalry between like the Sun and the Guardian, is it? Because people are going to both things. People are going to both Marvel and DC.
Yeah,
not. Yeah. And you can like both. It's not
you can like both.
Yeah, in the same way you can read both papers. I mean, it's unlikely that you're going to be looking at both going, there's going to be some reason for you to choose one. Yeah, you're going to be buying two, but realistically, there's an agenda. Like there's an angle. You're kind of like, oh, I'm going to read this one, and I'm going to read the other mad bastards. That seems to be like that. I'm guessing that's the.
It's a weird way to call 2000 AD.
Well, I've seen some of their storylines, Blake, and actually, I'm not sure that's entirely unjustified. Some mad shit. Dave's more of an expert about 2000 AD than I am, so by a long way. In fact, actually, to be fair, the fucking office cat at 2000 AD knows more about their comics than I do, just by osmosis.
Yeah, but Marvel and DC, well, I suppose they will have competition to a degree because they are market shares of the comic industry.
If there's a finite amount of money to go around, although the sale of pop vinyls and, geek paraphernalia leads me to believe it's not as little as you might think.
Yeah, because that's the thing, though. I think people who are into comics will possibly like comics from all of them and also independent comics as well. So I don't... Yeah. I don't think they're in that, but they steal characters off each other, ideas off each other all the time.
Yeah. Artists go and work at both over the course of their careers. They go back and forwards, and
they're both. As I said, the only competition I can think of is literally that if they're vying for market share of the comic book industry. But if anything, I think more modern days, I think it's less and less that, and it's actually more interest in movies and TV series these days than the actual comics, because I think they've got them. They're both the two big, almost monopolies of the comic book industry, I would say. But
they're pretty well entrenched, I would say, in the comic industry as certainly the two biggest players. I don't see him folding overnight. Let's put it that way. That's fair. I don't think either Marvel or DC are scrambling for rent anytime soon. They're not going to be like, "Come on, just give me another day on the office. I can get you £200 by the end of the month. I promise."
Yeah, looking at you, Telltale.
Exactly. Yeah, it's not happening. But I don't know. I guess I just find I've got to that point now. I don't know if it's an age thing or just a life experience thing. I've just stopped giving a shit about the. No, I don't mean generally.
In general, yeah. Just so the moral of this podcast is just fuck it.
No, it's just I've kind of given up on those. When I was a kid, I probably invested more in Sega versus Nintendo and things like you had a horse in that race. Now I couldn't give two shits. I really couldn't. I don't know if that's an age thing or whether it's just I just enjoy enough of both companies that I can just take or leave it. I just, like you say, maybe I've just given up, just generally. Maybe that's all it is. Who knows?
Yeah, it's not a big deal at the end of the day. As I say, I think everyone, I think when you're younger, you probably, because you've got that schoolyard mentality.
Maybe, yeah.
Because it is my dad's better than your dad, my console's better than your dad.
My dad's Nintendo. My console's better than your dad's. Yeah. I feel like there's a broken home joke in there somewhere, but I just feel uncomfortable making it. I don't know why.
Yeah.
It's because we have a guest.
Tetris raised me better than my mum ever did. So.
Ouch. Jesus Christ, Blake. That's uncalled for. I know your mum. She's a saint. I mean, having said that,
I was a Sega boy.
Yeah, true.
That means it was Collins. But
yeah, true.
Collins was shit.
Do you guys find that, like, do you guys feel the same way, or are there still things you're a little bit like funny about, like Terror?
No, I feel the same way as you. I mean, I think music's very much like that as well. You know, when I was a teenager, I was very much sort of like, this music's really good, and anyone who doesn't like it is a dick.
Just doesn't get it, man. Just doesn't get it, man.
And you don't get it because you're listening to Take That and the Spice Girls.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
I'm listening to all these cool artists.
What kind of stuff were you listening to as a teenager, so we can get a sense of?
I was into like quite a bit of dance music and stuff, like drum and bass and things like that. And I was into like things that I wouldn't listen to now. So as a teen, because I was a teenager in the 90s. Yeah. So Britpop was quite big, and you know, Blur and Oasis and all that sort of thing. And you know, there were some good bands who came out of that. And
yeah, for sure.
And you know, there were some bands who everyone's forgotten about, probably rightfully.
Yeah, sometimes. Definitely. There's certainly some where you think, man, what was the appeal? It's like, what did Shed 7 give you that the Levelers couldn't?
Not much, probably. No,
exactly. I like them. I like their music. I like both their particular music's fine, but at the same time, I listened to a Shed 7 song the other day, and it took me a while to realize it wasn't the Levelers. I don't know.
Yeah, there's a lot of sort of a lot of copycats and stuff like that. But I mean, you know, there was some good stuff in that sort of area. But I think, you know, that sort of looking back on it, I think electronic music was really kind of getting going during that time, and that's really the best music. The music that has lasted the longest for me has been the electronic stuff rather than the kind of guitar-y, rocky sort of stuff. Yeah, which was all a little bit retro and. I've just kind of got into quite a few different, you know, styles of music over the years, really, and I think kind of shaking off that, like Blake was saying, the playground mentality of my music's better than yours. Yeah, you know, leads you into listening into things that aren't necessarily fashionable and aren't necessarily what everybody else is into, you know.
Yeah, but I mean, you mentioned it. You mentioned Blur and Oasis, and that was a big thing. If you were old enough at the time, you almost felt like you had to pick a side if you were listening to those bands. Like you had to have a preference over the other. So why?
Yeah.
You had to like both. There's no harm. Thinking back on it, I've kind of liked both now. But I guess at the time, if I had to pick. If you put a gun to my head, and I felt like sometimes some of my friends might have considered it, but I felt like maybe I was kind of Oasis probably have edged it for me then, but now I don't really, not really left as much of a footprint on me as I would have thought. I don't know if that's just
I don't think, despite everything, I like songs from both bands, but I wouldn't have said that either band has left. I agree. I don't think either band has actually left much of a footprint on me.
No.
Like Blur, I like specific songs, but I never felt they could do an album, for example. I felt like they'd have a couple of good songs, but then the rest of the album just dirge normally.
Yeah, I mean, I could, based on the albums I've heard, that's probably about right, actually. It's pretty reasonable. I mean, I'm all about the Universal. That's my big Blur song.
Okay.
But now it's being used in, I think, British gas adverts or something like that. And I just find myself, there's something, I know it shouldn't matter, but something about when it gets used in any kind of advert, especially when it's for things like, let's be kind, putting it as kindly as I can, boring stuff like utilities and things that they're not very exciting. You know, they're really, you know, it's always nice to get a good deal. And obviously you can't not appreciate what they do for you in terms of, like, you know, providing heat and electricity and things like that. But they're not very sexy, are they? As a concept of seeing something you see a TV advert for and you go, "Oh, I'm all about that." Well, boiler service, sign me up. It's not the kind of thing I find myself really paying a lot of attention to on TV. I'm not very susceptible to advertising for utilities.
It's not because you're worried that the said band is sold out for utilities or anything.
Oh no, Christ no! I mean, it's very rarely up to them, is it? Like, it's usually a record company thing that they just kind of license the thing out, because you get this a lot, especially in the political sphere. Like, bands complain when their songs get used at political rallies and like political speeches and stuff, and sometimes it's just, I don't like that person, so I don't want them to use my music. It's like, that's not how that works, right? That's not how any of this works. So you don't just...
They've paid the money to use your song, you're going to have to live with it. Yeah,
exactly, yeah. It might suck. I'm not disputing the fact that it might suck for you, but at the same time, suck it up. It's like, it's one of those things about having a big... a big record deal, I guess, is you sort of open yourself up to not having as much control over things like that as you might otherwise have had. I mean, I don't know. I guess, Frank, that's one of the advantages of the sort of artists you deal with more often, is they don't have to worry about that stuff so much.
That is an advantage, yeah. I mean, there's less money involved and there's less all that sort of thing, but they've got creative control over the music that they produce. Yeah, and they haven't got anybody to. It's like with podcasting as well. It's like you haven't got a boss who's telling you what to do. You haven't got somebody who's telling you have to create this thing in this particular way. And it's the same with the independent musicians who I play on my show. Like you say, it's like they can do whatever they like.
Yeah. So out of interest, how do you pick? It's like you mentioned you have like a process. You have to obviously listen to someone. Where do you find this stuff?
Well, it has to be something that's not like on like a major label or anything like that, because it's so complicated trying to get something from a major label, and potentially expensive, I guess. Permission to get played on a podcast, and also the point is that I'm playing music that isn't on a major label, because I'm trying to actually promote music from elsewhere. But the main places that I get music from are, first of all, Bandcamp, and there's a site called the Free Music Archive, which
what do they do?
There's a lot of free music on there, believe it or not. Yeah,
and they keep it for you just in the space, do they?
Yes, it's this thing called the internet.
Yes, I've heard talk of this internet.
And there's some music on it, and so that's all like free downloads and stuff. And there's some really amazing stuff on there as well. It's and a huge amount of stuff on there as well. Absolutely, you could spend years just listening to the stuff that's on the Free Music Archive. Yeah, and the Internet Archive, which has got a space on the Internet. The URL is I think archive.org.
Oh yeah, another one. Yeah,
there's a lot of net labels on there. So net labels are basically labels that give music away for free. So that's all free downloads as well. And there's an absolute ton of those, and they're nicely sort of curated on the Internet Archive website. So there's a lot. I get a few bits and bobs from there, but it's mainly from Bandcamp and the Free Music Archive. Okay.
And do you kind of go with a specific style in mind? So do you just kind of, this week I'm going to do this kind of music, or?
No, I deliberately pick so it's usually about 10 or 11 tracks, I think. So I'm filling like 45 minutes, and I'm partly filling it with instrumental music and partly filling it with songs. Yeah. So I'll play the songs, and I'll pick some instrumental music that I can talk over.
Yeah, fair enough.
Doing little monologues. So, but it's all, I deliberately choose like a different genre for each track. So and it's nice to be able to, have all of these things at your fingertips, and you can pick I'll play an African tune here, I'll play a drum and bass tune here, I'll play like a folky sort of thing. Yeah. And just sort of mix it up nicely like that.
Yeah. Nice. Well, it sounds like, I really like the kind of the premise, just in the sense of having that kind of, it's almost like you say, like a character thing. Do you kind of is there a temptation to kind of frame it like an Alan Partridge style, like a radio station thing, or do you find that easy to sort of resist?
Well, it's because that's the first thing my wife said when she heard my first episode. She said, "Alan Partridge, in it." And
ouch! She just that's kind of the worst. Like the worst feeling is when somebody just goes like,
she meant it as a compliment. She was like, "Alan Partridge."
Yeah, it actually ended up sounding like it's just Alan Partridge. It's like
it's the same. It's the same principle. But if Alan Partridge was a kind of a podcaster of the like millennial generation rather than a radio DJ of like the whatever generation he is, and so my character has got similar traits to Alan Partridge in that he lacks a certain amount of self-awareness.
Yeah, I think you need that to be a lot of character comedy. I think probably has that certain trait kind of baked in somewhere to some degree. I would guess. I mean, I've not really.
So the listener sees things that the character doesn't see.
Yeah.
And therein lies the humor, hopefully.
Yeah, whatever's kind of blindingly obvious to the listener is not necessarily something that's just kind of went straight over the host's head. The character.
Yeah, but then also sometimes he's the smartest guy in the room, and he outwits. He alternates between one and the other. Sometimes he's really, really stupid.
Yeah,
and sometimes he's really he kind of he just takes the piss out of listeners' messages and stuff.
Yeah,
and so it's kind of two characters in one. In fact, what I'm doing at the moment is I'm kind of experimenting with like a little Jekyll and Hyde sort of persona. So Frank, the character, has decided that he's going to change his name to Lazarus Newman.
Okay,
and Lazarus because he's decided to become a new man.
Right,
and he's risen from the dead in a Lazarus.
Okay,
yeah. And so Lazarus is a lot more sort of self-conscious and a lot more sort of conscious of the fact that he might be insulting people, whereas Frank just says what's on his mind, and he just sort of kind of insults the listeners as much as he can.
Yeah, that's interesting. I like the way that you're kind of that the character's evolving as well. You know, that sort of as you're kind of going along, you're going on a journey, obviously, because you're creating this show and learning about the podcast, and obviously you're networking. Hence, here we are, stuff like that. Yeah, exactly. But I like the fact that you're not just, because I can imagine it's probably with character comedy. I imagine it's very easy to. Like, it would be easy to either get bored of it yourself, just if you play the same characters just straight forever, or get to the point where there's it's not that nobody wants to hear it, it's just there's nowhere else for them to go because you've you've taken it everywhere you possibly can. So it's nice that you've got, the ability to take it down a different path, and then say you can explore completely different scenarios and completely different, you can even revisit similar scenarios but with a completely different reaction and stuff like that. It just seems like quite a cool position to be in. That's good to hear you say that. Yes, I think it's I think it's important not to do the same thing every week, Yes.
So I could get stuck in if I was going to stick to the same shtick each time. I could do that, but it wouldn't be as interesting, and I think I'd probably lose people's attention over time because
there is that risk.
I'm kind of like I'm not really taking a break from it. I'm just doing it every 2 weeks, and it's coming out every 2 weeks, kind of come what may. I'm not doing like it's the end of season 1 now and having 6 months off.
I've noticed there's a lot of a lot of podcasts are going with that sort of season-based approach. I find it quite interesting. That it's not something that's ever occurred to me as something I'd want to necessarily do. I've always thought of, I suppose I've just never really thought of this show as something that breaks up into seasons very easily, I guess, because it's just because we never really know what we're going to talk about episode to episode. We just kind of go where, as you've seen, just kind of where the conversation takes us. I guess it just doesn't lend itself very well to a finite number of episodes per block. It just keeps going.
But I can see the appeal of like having a break from actually doing it. But also, I think if I did that, I'm slowly starting to build an audience now. If I stopped for 6 months and started again, like at some point next year, it'd feel like I'm going to have to start from scratch again.
I feel like it's probably one of those things that's more of a risk nowadays, I would say, than it probably used to be, because I think now, because podcasting has kind of become very, very hot as a media, because you can do pretty much anything with it. You can do a kind of you can do a heavily written show that's just like an audio drama or something like that, that's kind of heavily scripted and very highly produced, and individual voice actors and things like that, like things like We Fix Space Junk, or just the kind of shows that the big. Like I've heard of audio dramas where they've got sort of 8 to 10 individual voice actors for a cast of characters, and it's just, you can go all the way from there to what we are most weeks, which is a couple of mates just talking, just shooting the breeze and just kind of chatting shit. You've got that whole spectrum, and there's so much stuff on there that I guess if you now get to a point where you stop, even if it's only a temporary stop, they've got so much stuff to choose from while your show's kind of ramping up again, that you might come back and find they don't have time to pick your new thing back up. So I think you're right. I think it is kind of, I think with the kind of modern podcast explosion we've had, it almost feels like you can't really afford to stop. And I feel like when I say it, I sound like I must keep going. I sound almost fixated.
This is why you called your show The Crazy Train.
Well, yeah, this is it. That's certainly a factor in the naming convention, was just because because we never really have a script, or like say rails in our case. We've never really had that. Occasionally we'll come prepared with like, remind me to talk about this particular thing that happened to me, because I think it will make a great story and stuff like that. But that's the extent of it, really. We've never really had much in the way of bits. It's always been, just kind of off the cuff, and and sometimes, for better or worse, sometimes it means that there are episodes, like some of the early ones are a little bit like, we might overstep the line of good taste every now and then, through no fault of our own is the wrong way to put it, because it's absolutely our decision, but through without meaning to, we've kind of said something that's just like, okay, maybe that was a little much, perhaps. Blake knows exactly what I'm talking about. Yeah.
And he hasn't been on the podcast in ages. So.
No, it's not for any reason, not for any specific reason, Blake. Don't make it sound like it's it's purely just a logistics thing.
Yeah, I'm joking.
No, that's fine. I know. It's what you do, Blake. That's why I love you. It's why you keep coming back, and you know where I live. So there's that. Anyway, as Blake just gives me the silent signal of punching me in the face, that's as good a time as any to call the time on the episode of The Crazy Train. So, Frank, thank you very much for joining us this episode. We've very much enjoyed having you, and we will hopefully have you again in the not too distant future, where we can catch up again in sometime soon. And
great stuff. Yeah, absolutely.
You can join us again.
Yep, in the next season.
In the next season, yeah, when we go to series 2.
Season 2. Season 2.
Bit crazier train. There's even fewer rails. But wait, weren't there 0? Yes. But now there's minus.
Yeah,
sub-zero. Yeah, it's
negative rails.
Negative rails. The negative railcast. I don't know. But as I say, Frank, very much enjoyed having you on the show. Thank you for coming on and talking to us. And I say we will make sure there's stuff in the show notes for all the social media bits and stuff. But at this point, the floor is yours. So this is your plugging section that I promised at the beginning of at the top of the show. So anything and everything you want to plug, the floor is yours.
Okay, well, my website is frankburton.co.uk. That's got all of my stuff on there. There's some short stories of mine, also links to my books. I've got a book called A History of Sarcasm, which is a short story collection, and it's very good. And my new novel, 100, is going to be coming out very soon, and that's going to be an audio book as well, because I'm into doing audio things.
Oh, nice.
Ragbag is the name of my podcast, as we have mentioned. That is available on wherever you want to get it from, iTunes or Spotify or SoundCloud or anything like that. Mm-hmm. And that's Ragbag. I'm on Twitter as Ragbag Frank. And I've got a Facebook page where you'll find the Bono joke, which went down exceptionally well.
It sounds like it.
So check out the Bono joke it's just called Ragbag Podcast. That's the name of the Facebook page.
Nice.
And also check out philistinepress.com, which I didn't even mention during this time, but it's a really good website, and I spent a lot of time putting it together, and it's very good.
Nice. Excellent. Well, there you go. There's a ton of stuff there. As I say, I'll make sure that there's links to all of this stuff in the notes and on the website when the episode goes up. There'll be all of the different stuff. So if people want to kind of check your show out, or they want to just follow you on social media, or a multitude of these different things, because you've got a list. There's so many options. There's like Facebook, there's Twitter, there's websites, there's podcasts. I'll put the specific ones, the Jesse Eisenberg one in as a specific one, because that sounds like, let's say, we've got a lot of movie buffs in our listeners, so I feel like that's going to be one they're going to definitely want to check out. Blake, social media.
So, yes, you can find my prolific social media on Instagram at Harmer the Appreciator. You can find me on Facebook, if you can find me. And obviously, you can also find me on my Twitter account at Fucksake Blake.
Fucksake Blake. And you are, what is it, 2 tweets to date?
No, I recently made a third one.
Oh, you made a third. Oh, how exciting. Well, people should definitely go to at Fucksake Blake and check out your third tweet, which I can only assume is a stormer.
Oh, yeah. It's a promotion, actually, of upcoming Uncon.
Yes, we're doing a tabletop gaming appearance at Uncon Tabletop Convention, which I think will still have not happened yet by the time this goes out. So we can definitely talk about that. So, because otherwise it's just pissing in the wind, isn't it? So you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Rob Wade Vision. I also maintain the social media presence of Emotionally 14 and Talk Star Wars. You can find those on Twitter at Emotionally 14 and at Talk Star Wars, Instagram at Emotionally 14 at Talk Star Wars, Facebook Emotionally 14 and Talk Star Wars, websites emotionally14.com, talkstarwars.co.uk, podcast at emotionally14.com is where you write in if you wish to get your questions read on the air, and obviously, we will read them provided they are, not libelous or slanderous in any way. Then we're happy to read anything and everything you can send us, no matter how odd. So that's something you can most definitely enjoy. I feel like, Blake, I'm forgetting something and I don't know what. Help me out.
We also have our Facebook groups for the podcasts.
Thank you. That's why I have you. Here. Thank you, Blake. Just to cover my problems. Cover my problems.
Yeah, we got 2 podcast groups. Obviously, one for the Emotion 14 Crazy Train, and obviously for the Emotion 14 Gamescast, which is our podcast. Indeed,
yes. There you go. So thank you, Blake, for covering my inadequacies there. I appreciate it. But there you go.
Need a big towel.
All right. It's not batter that one particularly hard, if you pardon the expression. So there you go. That's been the Crazy Train. Thank you once again, Frank, for joining us on this episode. And as I say, there will be a big part. There will be all the links that are related to Frank and the Ragbag podcast in the show notes, so people can check those out. In the meantime, thank you very much for listening to The Crazy Train. This train terminates here.